when we are defining a function, we often need to define the function with different parameters, right? So what is the right set of parameters that we wanted to use and what is its behavior? To knowing all of these things will really help you to understand and to define a specific function with the specific requirements. So in this video, we will be discussing all the combination of function parameters so that we can know the behavior and we can know the right combinations that we need to use. So watch the video till the end so that you can able to understand clearly the behavior when we use combination of different parameters. So let us get started and discuss one of the first parameters that we have, which is nothing but positional parameters. So to understand that, I will take an example. Let's say this example simply I am mentioning as function. So inside of this particular function, I am taking name and age here. So consider this as a positional parameters because I am not passing anything to here, right? So now inside of this particular function, if I print name and age here, and after that if I call this particular function and if I execute this, so here it is saying name and age missing and we need to pass name and age, right? So I am passing Mahesh and I am also passing age, which is nothing but 22 here. And if I execute this, we can able to get the result, right? So this works fine when we have positional arguments. Let's say if I have positional arguments and keyword arguments. So keyword arguments, what I mean is default arguments, right? So when we don't pass any specific value, by default it will take one specific value what is defaultly assigned, right? So that is what I am speaking. So here I am taking country here. So in country I am mentioning India here. So now if I call this same function by not passing this particular country as a parameter, and if I execute this, so before that I will mention the country also. So instead of in the same function, same print, I am printing in the new print. So now country. So now if I execute this, you can able to see we are getting country India, though I haven't passed the country in here. So when we are calling this function, I'm not passing any country, right? But still we are getting the country. So now the combination that what we are using this in here is that first we are defining the positional parameters. So one requirement from you is that if you don't know about positional parameters and different kind of parameters that we have when we are defining a function, watch my previous video so that you can able to understand clearly what are the terms that I am using in this video. So having understood that, let us go ahead and see the combinations. So here I am using the positional parameters first, and after that I am using the default parameter here. So now if I replace this default parameter to beginning, so here I am mentioning this default parameter, and at the end I am having one positional parameter here. So now if I execute this, so we are getting an error which is saying non-default arguments follows default arguments. So which means this non-default argument, so this age is non-default argument, which means this age does not have a default value, right? So that is what it is telling. This non-default value age should always comes first, and this default value, the value for this variable having a specific default value, right? So this will always comes at the last. So now this combination, you should not use this combination, not even this combination. Even if you mention this combination, let's say I am taking this country and I am mentioning at the beginning here. So now if I mention at here this country, and even if I execute this with the name and age at the end and country at the beginning, and if I execute this, so we are getting the same error, non-default argument follow default arguments. Why we are getting this kind of error is because when we are calling this function, the first position parameter that what we have, which is nothing but Mahesh, this should match with the first parameter that we have in the function definition. So because of that reason, first it need to be matched with name, and this age need to match it with age, right? So because on but we are having country at the beginning and name and age at the end. Because of that reason we are getting this error. So always the right combination when we have positional parameters and default parameters, we always need to mention this positional parameters at the beginning. So now I am taking this positional parameters and I am mentioning in here. So now if I replace this and if I execute this, so we are getting the exact result that what we can expect from this function. So I hope you can able to understand when we are using these positional arguments and this default arguments, positional arguments always comes first and then this default argument should come. So now I will take one more example with a different combination here. So instead of country, what I will be doing is that I will take this value, this parameter, which is nothing but by using this asterisk. So what we are doing is that we wanted to combine the variable length arguments. So when we wanted to pass any number of arguments, all those arguments need to be accepted. So here, to understand that, I am passing, let's say, 33 here. So here in the function definition, we only have two parameters, but we are passing three arguments here. So now if I execute this, we are getting an error which is saying function takes two positional arguments but three are given. So here this function only takes name and age parameters, but we are passing Mahesh 22 and 33. So because of that reason, when we pass more or less, it will return this kind of an error. So when we pass more arguments, but all of those arguments need to be mapped with the parameters, then we need to use this asterisk, right? So that we have seen in our previous video also. So now what I will be doing is that I am assigning and I am taking a variable of marks by using this asterisk. So when we are passing any number of arguments, all of those arguments will be mapped with this particular marks here. So now if I execute this, so we are getting Mahesh and 22, and by this you can observe we are not getting any error, right? So now if I print this marks here and if I execute this, we can see a tuple. So in our previous video also we have discussed, when we are having this variable length parameter, all these values will be mapped with this particular marks, and that variable can be considered as tuple. That is what we are getting here, you can able to observe. So when we are passing this 33, we are getting this result. And let's say when I don't pass this value and I am only passing Mahesh and 22, which will be mapped with name and age. So now if I execute this, you can see we are getting an empty tuple, right? Which means we are not passing any value from the while calling this function, but when we print this marks, we are getting empty tuple. So by this you can able to understand, we can pass 0 or any number of argument that we wanted. All of those arguments will be mapped with this marks and whatever the variable name that we are giving. Let's say if I mention 33, 44, 55, and let's say even if I give any other type, let's say something I am giving a string here, and if I execute this, still you can see all these values, all these arguments will be mapped with marks. So here in this tuple we can see all the passed arguments, right? So Mahesh and 22 only mapped with the name, and remaining things are coming to this marks, right? So this is one of the combination that you need to use. Let's say if I take this marks and if I put, let's say, at the middle of this particular values, and if I execute this, you can see an error, function missing one required keyword argument, which is nothing but age here. So why we are getting this error is because we are having this age, right? So we are having this age at the end. What I mean by that is that this we are having this variable length argument marks at the middle, and we are left with age, right? So when we have this combination, we need to use that variable name, which is nothing but keyword argument. Here we need to use, when we are calling this function, we need to mention, hey, I am giving the parameter that need to be passed with age. So that is what we need to mention. So let's say these all parameters, these all values were mapped with name. This first parameter, this first argument mapped with name, and all these values 22, 33, 44, 55, even this string also mapped with this marks, because when we are using asterisk, whatever the parameter that we are passing, all of those parameters will be mapped with this marks only, because we are using this asterisk, right? So in order to get this age, because we are left with the age after this particular parameter, right? So in order to say, hey, this is the age parameter that I am passing, for that reason we need to mention the variable name here while we are calling the function. So let's say if I mention age here and if I execute this, now you can see the result. We are getting Mahesh 22 and all of these values coming inside of the tuple. So here when I use this age only, we are getting this result, right? When I don't use this age, we are getting error. Let's say I will explain one more combination here. So when I put these marks at the very beginning and I am mentioning it in here, and if I execute this, we will again get some kind of a error. You can see this name is, so function missing one required keyword only argument, which is nothing but name here. So why we are getting this error is because after this variable length arguments we are having this name after this variable length arguments. Because of that reason only we are getting error. Hey, this name is defined in the function, you are not giving the value for the name. That is what it is telling. So in order to get this name we need to externally pass the name. So we need to mention, hey, this value is for name. So I am passing, let's say in this case I will pass the name as Suresh here. And if I execute this, you can able to see the result. We are getting Suresh 22, and all of these values are coming inside of a tuple because we are using this asterisk, which means variable length arguments. How many number of argument that you are passing, all of those will be mapped with this particular marks when we are using this asterisk, right? So I hope you can able to understand that. So when you don't want to mention all of these keyword values here, you can only mention this name and age at the beginning. So the first example that what we have seen, that is the right example and that is the right combination. So what I will be doing is that I will take all of these things and I will mention in above cell, and I am executing this. This is working fine. So let us go to the first stage that what we are having, right? So now if I execute this, this will work fine. So this is the exact combination that we wanted to use whenever we don't want to mention all of this stuff here. So I hope you can able to understand the difference and the combination that we wanted to use when we have positional arguments and this variable length arguments. So let us go ahead and include one more combination that we have. Let's say I am taking the same example here. So previously we have seen the country as a default argument, right? So that is what I will be including that here. So I am having this country and I will mention as India here. So now if I mention this country and if I execute this, we are getting the India, sorry. And if I execute this, we are getting India and we are getting in an empty parameter, empty parenthesis here because we are not passing any value, right? Let's say if I pass 44, if I pass 55, 66 here, and if I execute this, we are getting the result inside of this particular tuple, right? So that is what we can see here. So let's say if I pass some value, so if I pass some value that need to be mapped with this country, then what we need to do? So in such case, we must mention the country here, because in the previous example also we have seen whenever we are having this variable length arguments, all the values that you are passing as when we are calling the function, all of those value will be mapped with this particular variable name only. Because of that reason, whenever we are having afterwards, whenever we are having the default value or any other value that we have, in order to map with this exact variable name, we need to mention the variable name while calling the function also. So here, let's say if I mention country as, so Bharat here, and if I execute this, and now you can see the updated result that we have, which is nothing but Bharat here. So when you pass these keyword arguments, when you pass the values directly without mentioning this country, let's say if I remove this country name here and if I directly pass this, so this Bharat is also going for this marks because we are using this variable length symbol, which is nothing but asterisk. Because of that reason, all this value will be mapped with this particular variable name and we can get the result as a tuple. So when we wanted to mention that, hey, this is not for this marks and this is for some other variable name, because so in such case you need to mention that variable name. So here if I mention this country and if I execute this, we can able to get the exact result. Let's say if I take this country and if I mention this country at the beginning, here I will be mentioning, and here I will remove this comma also. So now if I execute this, so you can see an error. Function got multiple values for country. So why we are getting this result is because when we are passing this as a positional arguments, this name, this Mahesh will be mapped with name, and this 22 will be mapped with age, and 55, understand carefully, this 55 will mapped with country. So we are having one value which is for country, and again we are passing a keyword argument which is country, that is also passing, right? Because of that reason, now the country having two parameters here, one is 55 and another one is country Bharat. Because of that reason we are getting this error. Let's say if I remove all these values, country also, if I remove all of these values and if I execute this, we can able to get the result which is nothing but Bharat, and we are getting the empty tuple for this marks here. So in this case, what you need to understand is that whenever you are having this asterisk variable length arguments, you need to mention those variable length arguments at the end only. Let's say if I mention 33 and 44 and if I execute this, why we are getting this error is because here, if you could carefully observe this, we are having Mahesh 20. Whenever we are calling this function, right, by using this function name, we are having Mahesh 22 country. So country is coming at the middle, and after this country we are passing this variable length arguments, right? We are having 33 and 44. So the structure should not be like this. So all of this, whatever the default arguments here, keyword arguments, so here we are mentioning this as a keyword argument, right? So this needs to be come at the end. So that is what it is telling. Positional argument follows keyword arguments. So these positional arguments here need to come before this particular keyword argument. That is what it is telling. And if I mention this, and if I mention comma here, and if I execute this, so we have got one more error, which is nothing but function got multiple values for country. So if I mention this country at the middle, and we are getting one error. If I mention country at the end, we are getting another error. So anyway, whatever the thing that is we are having, we are getting the errors. The structures need to be exactly same. So here you need to carefully mention the structure. So you need to be careful while mentioning the combination here. So let's say if I take this country, if I mention this country at the end, we don't get any of these problems, right? So that is what we have seen at the beginning. Let's say if I take this country as like previously, so I am taking the country and I am mentioning the country at the end. So now if I execute this, we can able to get 33 and 44 for marks, and we can able to get Bharat for country. Let's say even if I remove this country, that is what we have seen at the beginning, but still we are getting the country name which is India, and this 33 and 44 will be mapped with marks. Let's say even if I mention, let's say even if I mention country name which is Bharat, and even if I execute this, we are getting Bharat also for this. So whenever you are using this country name, right, so that need to be named, name needs to be mentioned in the while calling the function. So this is the right combination that you need to use whenever you are having positional arguments, keyword arguments, and variable length arguments. So apart from that, one more key aspect you need to mention is that you need to keep in mind is that this country, whatever the keyword argument, whatever the default argument that you are having, default parameters that need to be always comes at the end, and before that we need to have the positional arguments. Though this particular marks are considered as variable length arguments, but still these need to be comes in the middle. So I hope you can able to understand, I hope you can able to understand all of these things explained in this previously, right? So if you got any confusion, watch the video this particular part so that you can able to understand very clearly. So let us go ahead and see one more combination that we have, which is nothing but keyword arguments. So we have discussed the combination of positional arguments and keyword default arguments. We have seen positional arguments and this variable length arguments, right? So shall we discuss this particular variable length arguments and keyword arguments? So this does not affect much, so I will discuss that as well so that you can able to understand clearly. So I am taking marks here and I am taking country here. So I will be taking the same country, India. So now if I mention some code here and if I print marks and if I print the country, and if I call this function with, let's say, marks, if I simply call this function, because this marks, even if I don't pass anything for this marks, it will consider as a empty tuple. And if I don't pass anything for this country, by default we are having some value, right, that will be taken. And if I execute this, you can able to see the result. We are having this parenthesis, which is nothing but empty tuple, and we are having India, which is nothing but default value, right? So let's say if I pass some random values, let's say 33, 44, 55, and if I execute this, all of these values will be only mapped for marks, right? Because this is a variable length arguments. Any parameters, any argument that you are passing, all of those arguments will be mapped for marks. So let's say even if I pass, let's say I'm assuming the country name is Bharat, and if I pass Bharat here and if I execute this, still this Bharat also goes for marks because it will consider all the values. Let's say if you wanted to specifically pass any value for country, you need to specifically mention the variable. So for that reason, if you mention country here and if you pass this, you can able to replace this particular default value with whatever the value that you are passing. So that is also we have discussed previously also, right? So that is what it is. So let's say if you take this particular marks and if you mention this at the end, so that is what I am doing. And if I execute this, you can able to see the result. Function got multiple values for country. So what is happening is that whenever you are passing these values like this 33 will be mapped for country and country also mapped for country. Let's say if I take out this particular country name here and if I execute this, you can see when we are printing these marks we are getting 44 and 55, and when we are printing this country we are only getting 33. So though I don't have any intention for mentioning this country, but still we are getting the country name which is 33. The reason is because this first value 33 will be mapped for this country. That is the reason we are getting this result. So in order to avoid this kind of things, we need to mention the country name, though we have mentioned at the end of. So while defining this function, though we need to pass the country name at the end, though we have mentioned this country name at the beginning or at the end, when we are calling the function we specifically need to mention the variable name, then only it will be works as desired, or otherwise you will get this kind of a erroneous result. So let's say if I wanted to mention this country and I will mention here, I will mention Bharat here, and if I execute this, so you can see positional arguments follows default keyword arguments, which is again telling this country Bharat needs to come at the end. So I am taking this, so I will be pasting at the end, and if I execute this, so now you are getting function got multiple values for country. So now you can able to understand the difference and you can able to understand the exact pattern that what we need to match. So though we have mentioned this country at the end, we are getting one error. Though we have mentioned this country at the beginning, we are getting one error. So anyway, you are mentioning by calling this function by any of the possible way, you will get this error. The reason is because this function definition is not what exactly what it looks like. Because of that reason, we are getting this error. Let's say if I just take this variable length arguments and if I mention that variable arguments at the beginning, this will works exactly fine. So I will remove this comma, and if I execute this will works fine. You can able to get the exact result. So this is the only way, this is the only combination that you need to use whenever you are having variable length arguments and keyword or default arguments. So I hope you can able to understand all of these combinations, right? So let us go ahead and discuss one last combination that we have, which is nothing but variable length keyword arguments, which means arbitrary keyword arguments, which means any number of key value pairs that you are going to pass, the function will take. So I have discussed that in our previous video. Let us understand that combination in here also. So let's say if I take this first example here and if I replace this country, I am taking this country here, and what I will be doing is that I will take args here. So whatever the value that you wanted to take, let's say I will take pair here. So key value pair I will be getting, right. So that is the reason I am mentioning key value pair. And in order to get variable length key value pairs, you need to mention two asterisk. So for single variable length arguments, you need to mention one. So for keyword key value pairs, you need to mention two. So now if I execute this, I am not passing any pair for any argument for pair, but still we will be getting some result. So let us see the result. And if I execute this, we are getting an empty dictionary, right? So when we don't pass anything, it will get an empty dictionary. So in order to map the result with this particular pair, we need to pass key and value, right? That is what I am doing. So I am mentioning city, let's say Hyderabad, Hyderabad here. And if I execute this, you can able to see inside of this dictionary, we are having key value pair. So that is how it works when we have positional arguments and variable length keyword arguments. So let's say if I take this keyword arguments and if I mention at the beginning, so I will take this comma also, and if I execute this, so we are getting error invalid syntax. So why we are getting invalid syntax is because we are having this pair name age, right? So why we are getting, the reason is because you cannot mention this pair at the beginning. That is the reason we are getting this syntax error. So I hope you can able to understand, right? So let's say if I take this pair and if I mention at the middle here, and if I execute this, so still we are getting invalid syntax, because this always, see here you can see the pointer, right? So this pointer always pointing to age. So previously also, when we have something like this and if I execute this, this is pointing to this name, which means this pair keyword argument pair always comes at the last. So now if I mention this in here, you can see it is pointing to age, right? So that is the reason you always need to have this keyword arguments at the end. So now I am taking this here and I am mentioning at the end. So I will remove this comma, and if I execute this, you can able to get the result. So by this, what you can able to understand is that this pair and this keyword argument pair always comes at the end. So that is the one thing that you need to understand. Let's say if I take out this and if I mention marks here, and if I mention marks here also, so what I am doing is that I am taking this variable length arguments for marks and pair for this particular values. So here I will remove this name and I will mention 33 here. And if I execute this, so still we are getting error, need to mention comma, and if I execute this, so you can able to get the keyword, the variable length arguments and keyword variable length arguments also. So let's say if I take this pair and if I mention this pair at the beginning, so I am mentioning here, and if I remove this comma and if I execute this, we are getting invalid syntax. So whatever the combination that you are using, keyword variable length arguments always comes at the end. So if I take this marks and if I mention at the beginning, so I will remove this comma here, and if I execute this, you can able to see the result, right? So that is what the previously also we have seen. So now if I mention name and age here, and if I print the name and age also, so what I am doing is that I am including more number of arguments here. So I am having name, which name, age are the positional arguments, and this is a default argument, and this is a keyword variable length arguments, right? So now if I pass name, for name I will pass Mahesh here, and for age, so consider 33 for age and marks for 22. And if I execute this, you can able to get the result, right? So we have seen the combination of this positional arguments and for this variable length arguments, and we have seen this particular keyword variable length arguments also, right? So by combining this, we can able to see, we can get this result when we have this keyword variable length arguments at the end. So let's say if I take this and if I mention anywhere, we will get the error, right? So we always need to have this at the end. If I execute this, we are getting this invalid syntax. And if I take this and if I mention at anywhere if you mention, we will get the error. And if I execute this, we are getting error. And if I take this and even if I mention this at the beginning, I'm taking this, even if I mention at the beginning, we will get error. So by this, if I execute this, you can able to get the error. So by this, what you can able to understand is that this keyword variable length arguments always comes at the end. So we will discuss one more combination. So by that, we can able to conclude this, right? So I am mentioning whatever the thing that we are having for the beginning. So here we are having name, age, and we are having marks. We are having keyword argument pair, right? So previously we have seen this country, which otherwise means this particular default arguments should always comes after this particular positional and variable length arguments, right? So that is what I will be mentioning here. I will take this country here and I will mention below. So I am taking this. So I am mentioning here, and now what I will be doing is that I will print name and age also. So I will print name, age. So after that I will print country here. So if I print country and if I execute this, so we can able to get the result 33 and 22 is going for name and age. So if I pass, let's say Mahesh for name, so Mahesh, and for age, let's say if I pass, let's say 20 here, and if I execute this here, Mahesh and 20 mapped with name and age, and 33 and 22 mapped for marks. And after that, we are specifically mentioning this city, right? So this city is going for pair because we are left with country, right? So country is a default value. When we don't pass while calling this function, it will be not called, it will be not replaced. Because of that reason, we are getting the exact name, which is country, right? So if I take this pair and if I try to mention this pair, if I try to mention this key value pair here, and if I mention in here, I will remove this comma here, and if I execute this, you are getting an error, invalid syntax. So by this, what you can able to understand is that this key value pair always should comes at the end, no matter what it is. So I hope you can able to understand all the combinations explained in this video. So let us quickly go from start from the beginning and quickly wrap up this. So here we have discussed the combination of positional parameters and this particular default parameters, right? In such case, we always need to have these positional arguments at the first, and after that we need to have the default parameters. So later we have discussed positional arguments with this particular variable length arguments, right? So when we mention this variable length arguments at the beginning, all the values will be mapped with this particular marks, and when we remaining values, in order to get this name and age, we explicitly mention name and age parameters like this. So in order to not to mention, we need to have these positional arguments at the beginning. After that, we need to have this particular keyword variable length parameters. So after that, we have discussed the combination of these three. So positional arguments and this particular keyword variable length arguments and this particular default arguments, right? So this is the exact combination that we need to maintain. First we need to have the positional arguments, after that we need to have this particular variable length arguments, and at the end we need to have this default arguments. So after that, we have discussed one more important thing, which is a combination of all these things: positional arguments, variable length arguments, default arguments, and key value pair arguments. So this is the right combination that we need to use whenever we have multiple combinations. This is of all combinations, right? So first we need to have positional arguments, after we need to have variable length arguments, after we need to have this default arguments, and at the end, always at the end, we need to have keyword arguments. So this is the right combination that we need to use in order to not to get any trouble. So I hope you can able to understand all these combinations, and I hope you have found this video interesting. If that is true, hit the like button and comment whatever you think about this video in the comment section. So thank you for watching this video. To stay updated with my latest videos, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications to all, so that whenever I upload any video, you will get the notification. So once again, thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.